Today, we have a science lesson for you, really making this a Sunday school. So let's get started. This information comes from Prager University.
In 1966, Time magazine ran a cover story asking, "Is God dead?" The cover reflected the fact that many people had accepted the cultural narrative that God is obsolete, that as science progresses, there's less need for a God to explain the universe. It turns out, though, that the rumors of God's death were premature. In fact, perhaps the best arguments for his existence come from, of all places, science itself. Here's the story. The same year Time featured its now famous headline, the astronomer Carl Sagan announced that there were two necessary criteria for a planet to support life: the right kind of star and a planet the right distance from that star. Given the roughly octillion planets in the universe, that's one followed by 24 zeros, there should have been about septillion planets, that's one followed by 21 zeros, capable of supporting life. With such spectacular odds, scientists were optimistic that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, known by its initials SETI, an ambitious project launched in the 1960s, was sure to turn up something soon. With a vast radio telescopic network, scientists listened for signals that resembled coded intelligence. But as the years passed, the silence from the universe was deafening. As of 2014, researchers have discovered precisely bupkis, nada, zilch, which is to say zero followed by an infinite number of zeros. What happened? As our knowledge of the universe increased, it became clear that there were, in fact, far more factors necessary for life, let alone intelligent life, than Sagan supposed. His two parameters grew to 10, then 20, and then 50, which meant that the number of potentially life-supporting planets decreased accordingly. The number dropped to a few thousand planets and kept on plummeting. Even SETI proponents acknowledged the problem. Peter Schenkel wrote in a 2006 piece for Skeptical Inquirer, a magazine that strongly affirms atheism, "In light of new findings and insights, we should quietly admit that the early estimates may no longer be tenable." Today, there are more than 200 known parameters necessary for a planet to support life, every single one of which must be perfectly met or the whole thing falls apart. For example, without a massive gravity-rich planet like Jupiter nearby to draw away asteroids, Earth would be more like an interstellar dartboard than the verdant orb that it is. Simply put, the odds against life in the universe are astonishing. Yet, here we are, not only existing, but talking about existing. What can account for it? Can every one of those many parameters have been perfectly met by accident? At what point is it fair to admit that it is science itself that suggests that we cannot be the result of random forces? Doesn't assuming that an intelligence created these perfect conditions in fact require far less faith than believing that a life-sustaining Earth just happened to beat the inconceivable odds? But wait, there's more. The fine-tuning necessary for life to exist on a planet is nothing compared with the fine-tuning required for the universe to exist at all. For example, astrophysicists now know that the values of the four fundamental forces, gravity, the electromagnetic force, and the strong and weak nuclear forces, were determined less than 1/1,000,000th of a second after the Big Bang. Alter any one of these four values ever so slightly, and the universe as we know it could not exist. For instance, if the ratio between the strong nuclear force and the electromagnetic force had been off by the tiniest fraction of the tiniest inconceivable fraction, then no stars could have formed at all. Multiply that single parameter by all the other necessary conditions, and the odds against the universe existing are so heart-stoppingly astronomical that the notion that it all just happened defies common sense. It would be like tossing a coin and having it come up heads 10 quintillion times in a row. I don't think so. Fred Hoyle, the astronomer who coined the term Big Bang, said that his atheism was greatly shaken by these developments. One of the world's most renowned theoretical physicists, Paul Davies, has said that the appearance of design is overwhelming. Even the late Christopher Hitchens, one of atheism's most aggressive proponents, conceded that without question the fine-tuning argument was the most powerful argument of the other side. Oxford University professor of mathematics, Dr. John Lennox, has said, "The more we get to know about our universe, the more the hypothesis that there is a creator gains in credibility as the best explanation of why we are here." The greatest miracle of all time is the universe. It is the miracle of all miracles, one that inescapably points to something or someone beyond itself.
I hope you found that interesting. I know that I did. I certainly did. In our family, we've always thought that some of those numerical terms that we heard there were a kind of nonsense language. We speak about gabillions and gazillions when we're at a loss for hugeness. We've been led to believe that science and belief in God and his creation are opposites. This is not so. I repeat, this is not so. Brilliant scientists have spoken and written their testimonies to a creator God. This view is known as intelligent design. Note these two headlines. Scientists find evidence of God. How design beat Darwin. Sir Isaac Newton, who was a fellow like-minded believer in the one God, wrote, "This most beautiful system of sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being." Wow, from one of the most brilliant brains of his time. And yet, millions and millions of school children have been taught just the opposite and have been schooled to deny the very natural intelligence they possess. Millions have been fooled into believing that science has proven that God does not exist, or that he is dead, or that he does not interact in any way with mankind. The worship of science has, for some, become a substitute for the worship of God. A famous Englishman named Paley put it this way. He made what became a famous argument that if you came upon a watch in a field, we would assume that it was made by intelligence because of all of its various parts that worked together for one purpose, the telling of time. In that other scheme, the godless one, there is no purpose. Everything is random. And purpose has to be denied because behind a purpose, there would have to be a mind directing that purpose. The first slide here shows sand as nature has left it, as either the waves have retreated or the wind has stopped blowing. The second slide, note the word hope on the slide, written in the sand, and think about what that means, and you must come to the logical conclusion that it was written there by an intelligence. Even gazillions and gabillions of years could not and would not produce this. Likewise, if you saw written in the sand, "John loves Sally," you would not even imagine that after millions and millions of years that this just spontaneously occurred, that it was a natural occurrence. Intelligent design tells us that when there is a message, an intelligence has sent that message. There is no other explanation. When there is a message, there is intelligent design behind that message, and tells us that there was a messenger. Anytime you have design, you have a designer, a mind behind that design. The same logic applies to the search for the cause of a fire. Why do those specialists go to great lengths to find the cause of fire, possible arson, when it could just have been natural causes? Logic demands that there be a cause. On the one hand, you have all those who say there is no design, no planning, no direction, no purpose, no evil, no good, no point, no caring. No one who loves us, no compassion, no mercy, no restoration, and worst of all, no hope. Nothing but blind, uncaring, random actions, and without pity, without compassion, and without love. On the other hand, Scripture tells us in no uncertain terms in Romans 1:20, from the time the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky and all that God made. They can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse whatsoever for not knowing God. Verse 21 continues, yes, they knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. The result was that their minds became dark and confused. Verse 22, claiming to be wise, they became utter fools instead. And instead of worshiping the glorious, ever-living God, they worshipped idols made to look like mere people or birds or animals and snakes. In our situations, we're more likely to worship so-called science and what so-called science tells us about how things came to be. Verse 25, instead of believing what they knew was the truth about God, they deliberately chose to believe lies. Please note, this is a very important piece of information. They chose to believe lies. God has given us free will. And finally, Psalm 14:1 tells us that only fools say in their hearts that there is no God. So let's not be fools, and let's not be fooled. Let's not give our inheritance away. Let's not just inherit the wind, but let's inherit that marvelous kingdom that our truly awesome Creator God has promised.